Today, football is the most popular sport in the world. Around 250 million humans play it, and about 3.5 billion watch it. But it wasn't always like this. The story of football's evolution is one of power, influence, and ruthless organisation. It spans continents, cultures, and languages. And while games involving kicking a ball have existed for thousands of years, this story of football starts on Monday the 26th of October, 1863, a little over 3 weeks before Abraham Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. On this day, representatives of 11 football clubs and schools met at the Freemasons Tavern near Covent Garden in London. They agreed, quote, "It was most desirable that a definite set of rules for football should be generally adopted," end quote. And they founded the Football Association. A few weeks later, on December the 8th, they signed off on the first laws of the game, and modern football was born. The first official game was an exhibition played in Battersea Park on the 9th of January 1864. As mentioned, other cultures around the world, from the Caribbean to China, played games that involved kicking balls. And the game had existed in various forms in Britain for centuries before the Football Association was founded. So why is it that this specific meeting serves as football's foundation? Well, the answer is twofold. Firstly, the expansion of the rail network in Britain had made travel between regions much easier, meaning more football games, generating the need for a unified set of laws. And secondly, a certain type of mid-19th century Victorian gentleman was extremely good at codification. You see, the specific issue that the Football Association was addressing was that every public school played its own version of football, adapted to local circumstance. The schools Rugby and Cheltenham, for instance, had vast playing fields, and the game there differed little from the mob game that had been played since medieval times. But at Charterhouse and Westminster, where the game was played on cloisters, such rough and tumble would have led to broken bones, and so the dribbling game, which outlawed handling the ball, was preferred. Obviously, therefore, games between those from different schools or regions couldn't actually take place without tedious negotiation over which rules to use. An attempt to unify the laws was made at Cambridge University in 1848, when a universal code was pinned to a tree on Parker's Piece, while the working class Sheffield Club published its own rules in 1858. But most schools and clubs still stuck to their own laws. And the reaction in 1863 was much the same. There was some enthusiasm. Barnes and Richmond played out a 0-0 draw before the first official game under FA laws had even taken place. But on the other hand, Blackheath withdrew immediately, disgusted that hacking had been outlawed. By 1867, the lack of interest was such that the FA's president, Ebenezer Cobb Morley, of Barnes, who'd been the driving force behind the 1863 meetings, was now considering disbanding the organisation entirely. But that same year, a revision to the Sheffield rules took the FA laws as its starting point, and a unified set of laws slowly emerged, acceptable to both the working class clubs and teams centred on the public schools. Although there were still disagreements, such as those that led to the foundation of Rugby Football Union in 1871. That's right, if you didn't know, rugby and football do share a common ancestor. 6 years later, in 1873, there were 130 clubs signed up to the Rugby Association and only 122 to the FA, just 74 of which actually played the FA laws. But the influence of the schools was strong, as teachers, such as James Allen in Sunderland, and factory managers, such as John Lewis and Arthur Constantine, who founded Blackburn Rovers, returned to their communities and established clubs that played under FA laws. The conditions were there. They just needed a man of unusual vision and energy to take advantage. Which is where Charles W. Alcock came in. Now, Alcock was born in Sunderland in 1842. Educated at Harrow, and was elected to the FA board in 1866, succeeding his brother. He was one of the prime movers behind a game that took place at the Oval in London on the 5th of March 1870, as he captained an England side against a team of London-based Scots. Now, the game finished 1-1, but crucially, more than 500 people turned up to watch, a sure sign that football had a future as a spectator sport. On the 30th of November 1872, he took an England team to Glasgow to play Scotland, whose players all came from the Queen's Park Club in what is now considered the first official international game. It ended in a goalless draw. Alcock had become FA secretary in 1870. The following year, he proposed the creation of a knockout tournament open to all members of the association, modelled on the inter-house competition that he'd known at Harrow. It was chaotic, with byes and withdrawals meaning that Queen's Park reached the semi-final without playing a game. Both semis were also played at the Oval, the home ground of the Surrey County Cricket Club, of which Alcock was also secretary. After drawing with Wanderers, Queen's Park decided that they couldn't afford to return to London for a replay. So Wanderers, the club founded by Alcock in 1863, and for which he still played at the time, went on to the final. It was played before 2,000 spectators, in which Wanderers beat Royal Engineers 1-0, a triumph all round for Alcock. And the cup proved to be a huge success, and as attendances grew, it became apparent that there was money to be made. So, clubs, especially from the industrial northern cities, began inducing players to join them, many coming from Scotland. Now that offended the amateur instincts of the founders of the FA, and in 1883-84, Preston were actually expelled for making payments to players. However, it was slowly accepted that if football was to be a sport for all, professionalism had to be permitted, and it was legalised in English football in 1885. The movement was accelerated by Pope Leo XIII's 1890 encyclical on capital and labour, De Rerum Novarum, which called for the promotion of sport to alleviate, quote, the misery and wretchedness pressing so unjustly on the majority of the working class. Elsewhere, the future FIFA president, Jules Rimet, a devout Catholic, was sufficiently inspired to set up his own football club in Paris, Red Star. It would be open to all. He dismissed amateurism as, quote, the antisocial pretension of a privileged oligarchy. The next step back in England was to create a structure of regular fixtures to guarantee clubs an income. And so, the Football League was founded in 1888, with a readmitted Preston, who were only expelled for 1 year, winning the first 2 titles. The average crowd in that first season was 4,600. This was clearly a spectator sport with a future. Of course, what's striking now is how far-sighted the league's founders were. They were aware that a successful team would draw bigger crowds, allowing them to make more money, and so buy better players, making them more likely to be successful, creating a self-replicating cycle that would lead to a small coterie of superclubs. Sounds familiar? Therefore, home sides were mandated to make a payment to the away side. Initially £10, but from 1918 until 1983, when it was abolished, 20% of gate receipts. And a maximum wage was introduced. Although that soon became a source of great frustration to players, the initial intention was to prevent richer teams being able to entice players from less wealthy rivals. So, by the end of the 19th century, the English League had expanded to 2 divisions. Football was taking root all around the world, and attendances for the biggest games were touching 60,000. Just 33 years after Ebenezer Morley had considered scrapping the FA, football was established. And in the next episode, we'll explore how football spread and took root internationally on its way to becoming the world's most popular sport. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Daniel Taylor, Ollie Kay, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insight on every Premier League football story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football. And you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.